All right, well, I think I can officially say good afternoon now because it is 12 o'clock. So thank you for joining me today over the lunchtime. By the way, hope the lunch is actually good today. It's been good the last couple of days. So my name's Sean Massey, and what I'm calling this session is making the most of your home lab. So to quickly introduce myself, I'm a staff multi-cloud architect at VMware. I do a lot of cloud, I do a lot of EUC, I'm a VCDX, and yeah, I blog and other things. So today, your typical home lab session usually talks about how to get hardware and how to build it and put the pieces together. You know what? Way too many people have talked about that. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit instead is how to get the most out of that investment, right? Maybe you have the hardware, maybe you don't. Regardless of it, right? This is how to drive that value and how to make it worth your time and investment. So to start with, I did use this slide in a session on Tuesday, and it talks a little bit about learning theory. Right? Now, typically when we talk about technical training and certification, we're sitting in a classroom. There's a guided, or like a PowerPoint or a book or something that you read. And I say that those sorts of learning methods are a little bit more theory. And they're theory in the sense that we're not actually applying that knowledge. So they're good. You can get a lot of background. You can get of understanding how it should work on paper or how the vendor or the project expects it to work. But that's only part of the story, right? Labs are kind of the fourth learning style. It's hands-on. You actually get to tear it apart, make it work, and learn how it works in the real world as you connect things together with it. So I've had a lab for a long time, and I'll show you the timeline here in a second. But that lab grew over time. And I started small, and I built it to help further my personal and professional career. And that goes back all the way to 2003 when I was in college. My first home lab was a single old PC running Windows Server and just trying things out. And over time, as technology evolved and as my skill set and needs evolved, my lab has grown. And every time I hit what I would consider a career highlight, my lab played a role in it. Either helping, with my blog and providing me with the environment that I would use to actually develop and write my content, to helping with my VCDX and testing out my design, to even helping land specific jobs and helping with my job as I've gone forward by giving me a place to test out new things and develop my skills. And my home lab was really essential for all of this because it got me hands-on with the technology and was able to understand how things worked at a deeper level. And when you start getting into things like blogging and presenting at VMUG, it's really hard to share information. It's really hard to share what you learn if you don't have a place to test it out. And what this really comes down to is your home lab is an investment. Now, there's many types of investments here, right? They're first and foremost an investment in yourself, in your skill set. You're taking the time to develop yourself and build new skills. But they're also an investment in other areas. There's a financial aspect to it. There's a space aspect to it. You have to have a place to store it. And there's things that come along with that, like power and cooling and all those things that we talk about in a lot of those more, practical home lab sessions. And then there's a huge investment in time. And it's not just time in building the lab, but it's time in using the lab. and actually getting things out of it. So the premise of this presentation is, how do you make the most of that home lab investment, right? You don't want that lab to be an expensive pile of silicon sitting in the corner of your basement, heating it during the winter, right? And all too often, that's what it seems like they are. And in all honesty, there was about a year where my home lab was exactly that, mostly, right? It heated my garage in the winter, and in Wisconsin, there's value in that. We get cold winters, but it's not the most efficient use of that hardware. So to really drive the value out of our labs, we have to put on our architect hats. And what I mean by that is we have to start looking at outcomes, right? Everything that we do in IT, whether it's in our career development or in what our business is asking for, should be driven by our outcome. And what that means is asking the question, what do I want to accomplish with this? What do I want to learn? And that turns into, what is our use case? So in particular, in my home lab, I have 5 main use cases. Well, 4 for me and one for a few others, right? And these are all things that I wanted to learn, or things that I wanted to experiment, and I had outcomes that came along with it. So like one of the things up here is learning advanced routing and networking concepts. When I joined VMware, I joined as an EUC guy. I couldn't spell NSX or BGP, right? I had no concept to it, and if somebody asked me how NSX worked, I'd just say it's magic, which is, by the way, technically true, but it's, when you get up in front of a customer or partner, saying something is magic, Clark's third law doesn't work there very well. So I made a plan to learn those technologies. I found ways not only just to learn them, but to implement them in my home lab so that I was getting practical experience out of it. I was tying it back to use cases that some of the partners and customers that I worked with were talking about, but finding ways to implement it that had value to me. So when it comes to things like self-hosting or open source projects, right? Cut down the cloud bills, be a little bit more sovereign cloud-like in managing my family's data, kind of maintaining my privacy. That tied a lot into the advanced networking because those were things that the partners I was working with was asking about. And so trying to find ways to tie what I was doing at work to my learning, enabled me to do a little bit more and drive a little value out of my lab. Of course, there's this last one here too of, my kids want lots of Minecraft servers. Being able to, tie, networking to that. So they, isolate their Minecraft servers, let them have their friends connect to them, right? It was another way for me to learn those concepts. So what it comes down to is having a plan. Now, in my case, the plan wasn't nuking the 12 colonies of COBOL, but it was putting together things that allowed me to build my skill set. And to start with that, I actually had to take stock of what I had. When it came to learning advanced networking concepts, right, I had to understand where my skill set was. My CCNA had expired in 2013 and a lot had changed. And CCNAs don't cover BGP. So I had to go through and figure out what I needed to learn and then figure out how I needed to shift my lab around to be able to take advantage of that technology. So it's not just taking stock of what you have, though, from a skill set a skill set wise. It's also taking stock of what you actually have on hand. Will your hardware, fit your needs? Will your space fit your needs? Does this fit your use case? And if not, what do you need to do to make your use case work? And time, right? We're all busy. Maybe it's family stuff, maybe it's community involvement, maybe it's all of the above, right? But you have to take away something in order to invest in your skill set. So how long do you think it will take to develop those skills? Do you think you can accomplish it in the time you have? And if not, what do you have to take away from in order to do it? And that's a key consideration here as you go, go forward and utilize your lab. And you can't just try to jump right to the end state, right? You have to think about prerequisites. You have to think about intermediate steps. And while it is fun to just, try to deploy something and see what breaks, because you can learn a lot from that. And God knows I have learned a ton by just trying to go, oh, I'm gonna do this, and this is where I need to be. Forget everything else along the way. I'll just figure it out. You aren't necessarily making the best use of your time there. And finally, you need to get the required approvals. Now, in our enterprises and work environments, that's usually IT managers, change advisory boards, budgeting processes, etc. You still need to get these kinds of things done at home. And, we have the spouse acceptance factor, right? All those expenses that we have to put in, whether it's, financial or time-related or space-related, are things that we need to sign off on. Because they do impact they do impact our family. These are things that need to be discussed. If you want to invest a lot of time in learning a new technology, and you also have kids to get to scouts and soccer and get to and from school, as well as try to fit a 40-hour work week in there, something's got to give. And those are the conversations you have to have in order to actually be able to dedicate time to your self-development and self-learning. And lab projects can die on a vine because life gets in the way. And sometimes you do have to set those aside. So you have to find a way to balance your career development with everything else going on in life, including your day job and family. So I know this session was scheduled for a half hour, but I think I'm going to give Alistair about 15 minutes back because I'm basically up to the end here. My final takeaway is you have to ask yourself, what do I want to get out of it? Right? I'm going to make this investment in my lab. What do I want out of it? And how am I going to get there? Because that's the only way you're really going to be able to get that value out of your lab and out of the investment you make. And in the end, how you're going to really make an investment in yourself. So I want to thank everyone for coming today. If you haven't had lunch already, you get an extra 15 minutes back to go get in line, and hopefully they have some really good food down there today. So thank you. If you have questions, I'll be off to the side here, and have a great day.